Okay, so I'm here today with a recipe, and so I'll tell you kind of what it is first. It's a pasta dish that you can just call, pasta with sausage, or whatever. So I'll talk about the ingredients that you want. You want, first of all, a 28-ounce can of whole peeled tomatoes. It doesn't really matter what brand of those. You want a 16-ounce box of some kind of pasta. This works with any pasta that has a little more texture to it. I find that penne works fine. I have rotini here today. You want 2 of these containers of 8 ounces of whole mushrooms. You could also get the pre-sliced kind because we are going to slice them. You want 4 cloves of garlic. The original recipe I'm adapting this from calls for 2 cloves of garlic, but I tend to like to put a little more garlic in there. And then you also want salt and sugar, and then also, which I haven't taken out yet, but I'm going to take out now to show you, you want a 16-ounce package of sausage. I got the Aldi brand, Appleton Farms, but you could also get just like Jimmy Dean. Just make sure that it is not flavored as like with syrup or with sage or whatever. You just want the regular, it might be called original, but you want to make sure it's a pound of premium pork sausage. Okay, so the next step, I've taken out my sausage and I've put it onto this 12-inch cast iron skillet. You can definitely use something that isn't cast iron. Whatever pans you have on hand is completely fine. And basically, we're going to turn it on to medium-high. So for me, that's about 7. And while it heats up, we're just going to kind of chop it up a bit. You want to kind of treat this like ground beef. You want it to be in tiny pieces. You don't want huge like slices or whatever. So while this heats up, we'll just kind of break it up. Kind of hard to do totally one-handed with the camera in my other hand. But once we get it kind of broken up, we're actually going to, I've gone ahead and I've peeled the garlic and chopped it up a bit, and we're going to add this to it once it heats up. All right, so we're definitely hot, and you can probably hear it sizzling now. And I'm still going to continue to chop things up, but I'm just showing you adding the chopped up garlic to the mix. All right, so the sausage is pretty much browned at this point. It looks a little pink just because of the angle, but it's really getting there. So what we're going to do now is we are going to add the mushrooms, which I have washed and sliced, to the meat mixture. All right, so we're adding this in. Now, this is going to be a lot of mushrooms. They will cook down, don't worry. They do shrink quite a bit in the cooking process. And again, we're keeping this over medium-high heat. The mushrooms will cook down. And we're actually going to let this cook, stirring occasionally until the mushrooms have turned brown, which they will do in the cooking process. And they will release a lot of liquid. We're also going to wait for a lot of that liquid to be evaporated before we move on to the next step. And I'll show you what that looks like. But we're going to go ahead and give this a stir. And it's going to look really full at this point, but like I mentioned, these suckers will shrink. Don't worry if there's some crispy bits at the bottom of your pan. We will deglaze when we add the tomatoes. Now, when you see the mushrooms start to release their liquids and so forth, this is usually a good time to go ahead and start the pasta portion of this so that it's ready at the same time as this. So what I've done now is I've filled just sort of a big old, scrappy looking pasta pot full of water, and, you know, go ahead and bring that up to high heat. And you can even cover it if you want to increase the speed at which it begins to boil. Just follow the normal pasta directions, you know, a little bit of salt to the water, and when it comes to a boil, cook it for however long your package of pasta instructs you to, and then drain. Okay, so as I promised, the mushrooms have definitely reduced and have turned brown at this stage. And, you know, while these are reducing and while they are cooking, you should be stirring, right? And just making sure nothing gets either undercooked or overcooked. But so this is usually a good point where you can kind of see the mushrooms have turned this sort of tannish color. Now you're going to add the can of tomatoes as well as the sugar and the salt. So I went ahead and opened the can of tomatoes and put the sugar and salt in on the top there. But it's just 1 teaspoon of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt. So you're going to add the tomatoes to this mixture, including the juice that's in there. Okay, and make sure you get all the juice as best you can. And what you're going to do is you're going to break up these big old tomatoes with the side of your spatula, or if you're using a spoon, that's fine as well. I use a spatula for this dish because I find that this stage goes pretty well, the chopping of the tomatoes, compared to using a wooden spoon, although if that's what you prefer, you absolutely can. I usually cut them into quarters. Halves, I find, you still get huge chunks of tomato in your mouth. So you're going to want to bust these up, and you're going to keep it over medium-high heat. And once these juices come to a boil, then you're going to reduce the temperature, which they're not there yet, really. You can see boiling things, but there's more juices to pop open. You're going to reduce the heat to a medium-low or just a low, and just kind of let it simmer until this thickens a bit, which it will thicken. So I'm almost there. Chopping them up. Okay, once you've chopped all the tomatoes, give it a good stir. You can see there's quite a bit of juices in there roaming around, and that's what you want to look for. Okay, so we're going to wait for this to really come to a boil, which it looks like it's starting to do a little bit, and when it does really vehemently boil, we're going to reduce that heat to a low. All right, so we have our pasta boiling back there. We have this simmering over here. Now this looks just about done, but I'm just going to let it keep going. There's really no harm in letting it continue to cook. But this is how it should look when it's finished. It has this sort of beautiful red color to it. And we're just going to let this keep going. We have our pasta back here going for another couple of minutes. And when it's finished cooking, we'll obviously go ahead and drain it. And then we'll return it to this pot, the pasta pot, and we're going to pour this over top of it. All right, so I've drained my pasta and returned it to its pot, and now we're going to pour the sauce that we made over top of it. Okay, so I've poured it in, and now we're going to go ahead and mix it all up. And you have this lovely looking pasta dish. Now, you could put some Parmesan on top of it when you serve it. I personally am going to be having it with some homemade focaccia bread. But there you go. Your penne with sausage, or, you know, rotini with sausage pasta recipe.